What if I tell you that there was a direct connection between World War II and a couple getting romantic one fine evening in their bedroom? Surprised? So was I when I read this book, Psychology of Money, written by one of my favorite authors, Morgan Housel, Timeless Lessons on Wealth, Greed and Happiness. Hi guys, I'm Amrut Deshmukh, your Booklet Guy. So today I'm going to share with you my top learnings from one of my favorite books, Psychology of Money. So let's get started. The first big idea is that stop predicting the markets. The couple that got romantic one fine evening were the parents of Hitler. And all we know is that Hitler was primarily responsible for World War II. Let me give another more apt example from the book. A security guard in America, because he did not do his duty properly, led to student loan crisis in 2010. No connection? Let us find the ripple effect of that tiny tail event which nobody can predict ever. The 9/11 attack forced the Federal Reserve to cut down the interest rates. That led to a huge bubble in the real estate market. And thereby, there was a financial crisis of 2008, which we call it as subprime, which thereby laid off millions of people jobless. And they in turn went for a higher education, and that led to a huge demand for education loans at a default rate of 10.8%. So is it even practically possible to predict that tiny stupid tail event which will eventually lead to a huge financial crisis? No way. And hence the author insists there is no point in predicting the markets. The next big idea that I learned is that social comparison is the biggest enemy of wealth. The social comparison stems from the biggest disease called more. The deadliest disease the humans can ever have is more. And the main reason of this deadly disease called more is because we fail to understand how much is enough. Now, enough doesn't mean being conservative or giving up the opportunities or not exploiting your potential to the fullest. Enough means realizing the opposite of the never-ending, insatiable appetite for more, which will push you to the point of regret. The next big lesson I learned is called as the investment irony. There is hardly any correlation between the amount of effort that you put in for the analysis of the investments and the return on investments. The intraday traders, the short-term traders, they spend so much time on the markets and make hardly any money out of it, whereas the long-term investors who hold their positions for maybe 5 years, 10 years, do much less effort and gain more returns. For example, my recent observation in stock market is that suppose Sensex closed at 20,000 yesterday and today it rose to 20,500 maybe. The movement of only 200 points took during the market hours from 9:15 to 3:30, whereas the remaining 300 points was through an overnight gap. I think investment in stock markets is the best possible passive income humans can have, because when you're actually sleeping in the night, because of the overnight gap, because US markets are open at night when we are sleeping, you are actually making money only if you are a long-term investor and not a day trader. So the big lesson that I learned is that there is very little correlation between the amount of effort put in investments and the returns we get from the investments. Next one is my favorite, that our expenses increase in proportion to our income. For example, if I get a promotion, suddenly I don't enjoy the small TV in my house. I create the demand for a bigger house. And if I get into the top management, the CEO, suddenly Mathiran and Mahabaleshwar become cheap destinations. Now I have to maintain my status and have to go to Mauritius and Switzerland. You see, expenses increase in proportion to our income. And the problem here is, as our income increases, to maintain our status, we also increase our expenses. And the difference between the two is our accumulated wealth, which also remains same. So the author tries to convince us that as your income increases, you should at one point flatten your expenses. Try to live slightly below your means, and the gap increases as your income increases, but your expense doesn't increase in the same proportion, and your gap is nothing but your accumulated wealth. So do not allow your expenses to increase in proportion to your income. The next idea says that wealth is income not spent. We have to understand the difference between wealthy and rich. When you see a millionaire having a Ferrari, he has actually reduced his wealth to the extent of the cost of Ferrari. That means we see only his richness and not his wealth. Wealth are always invisible. In the portfolios of the millionaires, in the investments, the real estate ownerships, which we never see. So what we see is only their richness. So wealth is income not spent. 80% of the self-made millionaires in the world, their first car was a used second-hand car. The Ferraris, BMWs and Rolex watches came at a much later stage of their career. Your equation shouldn't be income minus expenses is equal to savings, but income minus savings is equal to expenses. You have to be very clear about your savings, and the remaining balance should be used for your expenses. And that will help you to accumulate your wealth. So these are my top learnings from the book, The Psychology of Money. I highly recommend you to read this book because when I was in stock market, I must have read more than 300 books on stock market, finance, wealth. But after reading this book, I realized I hardly know anything about money. So if you have already read the book, please put your comments about your learnings from this book. So happy reading and bye-bye.